An oil refinery in the city of Ulfa, the capital of the Republic of Bashkortostan in Russia, has come under Ukrainian drone attack. The strike, carried out by a kamikaze drone, caused an explosion and fire at the refinery. Footage circulating on Telegram channels was filmed by local residents. There is no information about casualties. This is not the first attack on Ulfa, which is located approximately 1,700 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Ukrainian drones have targeted the refinery in this city several times.
Вон опять стреляют. Ну или взрывается.
Russian citizens are saving more and more on basic everyday necessities due to the rapid rise in prices, which, even according to official Rosstat data, has reached 40% since the beginning of the war, reports the Moscow Times. The number of clothing purchases in January to August 2025 has fallen by 8%, Kommersant reports, citing data from the OFD platform. Due to the decline in demand, according to the Union of Shopping Centres, large fashion retailers will be forced to optimize up to 40% of retail space. To save money on food, consumers are increasingly visiting hard discounters which sell the cheapest goods with maximum discounts. The revenue of such stores, Svetofor, Chisik, Dobrotsen, grew by 27% year-on-year, a record among all food retailers, according to Infoline statistics. In Russia, people are buying clothes and food in large quantities, causing stores to empty. It is possible that this will lead to a food crisis in the first place in this country. What is happening is leading to an escalation of protests against the government. The continued growth in the attractiveness of this format is influenced by the savings behavior of consumers, which has intensified over the past year under the influence of the high key rate, explains the General Director of Infoline Analytics, Mikhail Burmistrov. The use of discounts and promotions has become the most popular form of savings. It is used by 68% of consumers. According to a study by Romia, 58% consciously refuse certain goods that they bought before. 57% try to find analogues in lower price categories, and almost half, 49%, choose low price stores for shopping. To minimize spending on food and essential goods, 46% of Russians practice reducing the frequency of trips to stores. Bromir writes, savings have even started to be made even by well-off people with income from 150,000 rubles per month per family member. The research of B1 Group of companies has shown. Now, every second of them limits himself in spontaneous purchases, although only 6 months ago, there were only 22% of such people. The demand for equipment and electronics has collapsed this year at a record level for 30 years. Dmitry Alexeyev, co-owner and director of DNS Group of companies, told RBC. According to him, this year, sales have decreased nominally in rubles, which was not the case before. We had periods when the market could fall in pieces, in dollars, but in rubles, without taking into account even inflation, it has never fallen, said Alexeyev. Although Rosstat reports on the growth of income and real wages, the real purchasing power of people is falling, says the co-chairman of Business Russia in the Moscow region, Roman Kalanov. We now see that Russians minimize spending in every possible way. They buy only goods with discounts or promotions, postpone large purchases, even in the food segment, for example, stocks for winter, says Anna Vedenieva, founder of Vedenieva Consulting Group. She believes that the current decline in sales is not a short-term crisis, but a structural shift in the behavior of consumers, most of whom expect further price increases. These expectations have become a self-fulfilling forecast. The more people believe in the worsening of the situation, the more actively they change their behavior, exacerbating the crisis, says Vedenieva. Russian federal TV channels have refused to give a detailed account of why mass protests and bloody riots broke out in Nepal. The main reason is the blocking of 26 social networks by the country's authorities, including Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, X, and LinkedIn, writes Agents Fo. The local youth immediately revolted and overthrew the government, a nightmare for the Putin regime. The fact is that in recent years, no fewer restrictions have been introduced in Russia, but Russians tolerate it. A vivid example of the overthrow of a dictatorship with a video of a triumphant crowd causes concern in the Kremlin, so the coverage of the protests on Kremlin channels was appropriate. Russian TV either kept silent about this detail or passed it over in passing. Instead, the version about intervention by external forces was routinely aired. Russia 1 did not say a word about blocking social networks. Channel 1 mentioned the ban only in passing, emphasizing the external coincidence of the protests with Nepal's intention to join the SCO. NTV, although it named the blocking of foreign platforms as the reason for the protests, did not list which social networks were banned. Experts emphasize that the reality was different. Nepal's youth took to the streets precisely because the authorities banned their usual channels of communication and information. The protests turned into mass riots. Dozens of people died. The parliament, the Supreme Court, and the houses of officials were burned. Under pressure from the streets, the government lifted the ban, and the country's prime minister resigned. For the Kremlin and Russian propagandists, this is a scary scenario. In Russia, Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn are also banned. YouTube is restricted and WhatsApp calls are blocked. But there were no protests in the country, which is why federal channels are trying to shift attention to external interference, just so that Russians do not draw parallels and think that the government is afraid. People are capable of overthrowing the government if it deprives them of basic freedoms. For many, the scenes in Kathmandu were reminiscent of the turmoil that gripped Bangladesh last year and Sri Lanka in 2022. The unrest began Monday as a self-styled Gen Z protest against corruption, nepotism, and restrictions on social media. It quickly escalated after security forces opened fire on the crowds. Then protesters had stormed and torched Parliament, the Supreme Court, and multiple government offices, including Singadurbar, the Central Administrative Complex. Homes of political leaders were attacked, police stations overrun, and Tribhuvan International Airport briefly closed. In addition, media outlets and schools were set on fire, while the Ministry of Health and Population was also destroyed, including the National Health Emergency Operations Center. The army assumed control of nationwide security late Tuesday, local time, deploying troops across the Kathmandu Valley and imposing movement restrictions to stabilize the situation. Checkpoints were established and people have been urged to stay home except for essential travel. Media also reported the army recovering some of the weapons looted from police personnel, while youth groups helped apprehend escaped prisoners and return firearms. Some inmates voluntarily surrendered.